The scent of roasted rosemary and garlic hung heavy in the air, a rich, cloying perfume that failed to mask the acidity of condescension. Alex sat at the head of the dining table, a position that should have signified honor but had been twisted into a seat of pity. His wife, Chloe, sat to his right, her hand periodically landing on his forearm, with a touch that was less about affection and more about control. Across from him, her sister Olivia watched with an expression of thinly veiled amusement. It was the 8th family dinner he had endured in this state, a ghost in his own home. "Alex, darling, the potatoes are at your 3 o'clock, Chloe said, her voice pitched to the register one might use for a small child or a poorly trained dog. He heard the faint scrape of Olivia's fork against her plate. "Be careful, Chloe. He might miss and get it all over that lovely shirt. It's probably best if you just do it for him." A murmur of agreement went around the table from Chloe's parents, who saw his condition not as a trial to be overcome, but as a permanent stain on their daughter's otherwise perfect life. Alex felt Chloe's hand leave his arm. A moment later, a forkful of mashed potatoes, slightly too cool, was pressed against his lips. He opened his mouth and accepted it, the act of being fed a humiliation so profound it was almost surreal. He was a 42-year-old man, an architect who had built towers that touched the sky, and he was being spoon-fed in his own dining room. They thought his world had been plunged into impenetrable darkness 8 months ago. They were wrong. The accident, a freak scaffolding collapse on a downtown site, had indeed stolen his sight, but only for a time. For the last 5 of those 8 months, his world had been coming back into focus, first in blurry shapes and soft colors, and now with a clarity that was sharper and more painful than ever before. He saw the pitying glances. He saw the smirks exchanged between Chloe and Olivia when they thought he was staring blankly at the wall. He saw the way his father-in-law, Robert, would hold up documents for him to sign, his finger guiding Alex's hand, a smug certainty on his face. He saw everything, and he heard everything, especially the whispered conversations they thought were lost to his void, the most damning of which had come from his own wife, spoken to her sister in the supposed privacy of the kitchen just 1 week ago. "Is he getting suspicious about the accounts?" Olivia had asked, the sound of a wine cork popping. "Please," Chloe had scoffed, a sound like tearing silk. "He's too blind to see. He doesn't see the statements. He doesn't see the transfers. He doesn't see anything. He just signs where I tell him to sign." That sentence, "he's too blind to see," had not been a revelation. It had been a confirmation. It was the keystone in the arch of their deception, and it had solidified the trembling foundations of his own resolve. They thought he was a broken man, a liability to be managed. They had no idea that the man they were feeding like an infant was meticulously, patiently, and silently building the case that would bring their gilded world crashing down around them. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against the cool, smooth cylinder of a fountain pen, a gift from his late father. To them, it was a useless relic. To him, it was the instrument of a coming judgment. Thank you for joining us for this story. We see you, we appreciate you, and we're so glad you're here. If you're enjoying it so far, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. We love hearing from our community, so drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get back to the story. The first month after the accident had been a symphony of performative sympathy. Chloe had been the perfect, doting wife. She had read to him for hours, her voice a soothing balm in the disorienting darkness. She described the world to him, the color of the sunset, the new blooms in the garden, the expressions on the faces of their friends. Olivia and her parents, Robert and Eleanor, brought over meals and offered hollow words of encouragement. "You're so strong, Alex," Eleanor would say, her hand patting his with the brittle touch of a dry leaf. "Chloe is a saint for what she's doing." Alex, adrift in a sea of blackness and pain, had clung to Chloe's voice as a lifeline. He was a man who had built his life on precision, on blueprints in clear lines. Now he couldn't even navigate his own bedroom without assistance. His career was on hold, his projects handed over to his partner Marcus, who visited regularly, his voice a welcome anchor of normalcy. "We're keeping everything running, Alex," Marcus had assured him. "Just focus on getting better. The firm will be here when you get back." Alex had believed in this collective support. He had believed in his wife. The first hairline crack in that belief appeared during the second month. The specialist had been cautiously optimistic. "The trauma to the optic nerves is severe, but not necessarily permanent," Dr. Evans had explained. "There's a chance, with rest and treatment, that your vision could return, at least partially." When he relayed this to Chloe, her reaction was strange. There was a flicker of something in her voice, not joy, not relief, but something else, a hesitation. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful. But we can't get our hopes up too high, can we? We have to be realistic." Being realistic, it turned out, meant Chloe taking over their finances. "You can't see the screen, honey," she'd said, her tone syrupy sweet. "It's just easier if I handle the bills, the investments. You just tell me what you need." He had agreed. What choice did he have? He trusted her. He gave her his passwords, his PINs, the keys to their shared kingdom. It was a practical solution to a practical problem. Then Olivia's visits became more frequent. Her voice, unlike Chloe's, was never soothing. It was sharp, inquisitive, planting seeds of doubt disguised as concern. "Is Alex's disability insurance paying out enough?" she'd ask Chloe, always within his earshot. "You have to think about the future, your future." "We're managing," Chloe would reply, though her voice sounded increasingly strained. "Managing isn't thriving, sweetie," Olivia would press. "That big commission from the Sterling Tower project, did that already come through before the, you know?" The commission had been substantial, the culmination of 3 years of work. It was supposed to be the cornerstone of their next decade, the fund for a future they had planned together. "It's in the investment account," Alex had said from the sofa, his voice flat. He remembered the exact figure, the wire transfer confirmation he'd seen just days before the accident. "Oh, of course," Olivia said quickly, her tone shifting. "I just worry about you two." But her worry felt like a probe, searching for weaknesses in their financial armor. A week later, Chloe came to him with a stack of papers and his father's fountain pen. "Darling, these are just some standard forms for the insurance company, and a few things for the bank to consolidate our accounts. It will just make it easier for me to manage everything from one place." He'd hesitated. "Can you read them to me, Chloe?" There was a sigh, heavy with impatience. "Alex, it's pages and pages of legal jargon. It's exactly what we discussed, just making things simpler. Do you not trust me?" The question was a weapon, and it struck its target. To doubt her felt like a betrayal of everything she was supposedly doing for him. He felt a pang of guilt. Ashamed, he allowed her to guide his hand. He felt the familiar weight of the pen, the smooth glide of the nib as he scrawled his name where her finger pointed. He signed 3 times. Each signature felt like he was giving away a piece of himself, but he pushed the feeling down, chalking it up to his own frustration and helplessness. He was a burden, and this was one small way he could make things easier for the woman carrying his weight. He had no way of knowing he wasn't simplifying their finances. He was signing away his control over them. The transition from partner to patient, and then from patient to liability, was subtle but swift. In the 3rd month, the tenor of the house changed. Chloe's readings became less frequent, replaced by the constant murmur of the television. Her descriptions of the world outside ceased. Her patience wore thin, fraying at the edges like old cloth. A cup he knocked over by accident prompted a sharp, "For God's sake, Alex, can you just be more careful?" Her apologies afterward were immediate but felt rote. The guilt of her outburst more important to her than the sting of her words. It was during this time that Olivia's influence became an undeniable presence. She and Chloe would have long, whispered conversations in the kitchen or on the patio, their voices dropping whenever he entered the room. They believed his blindness was accompanied by deafness, or perhaps just a general lack of awareness. They spoke of him in the third person, as if he were a piece of furniture. "Is he ever going to be able to work again?" Olivia asked one afternoon, the sound of her sandals clicking on the hardwood floor of the hallway. "The doctors don't know. It doesn't look likely," Chloe replied, her voice flat and tired. "His firm is being supportive for now, but how long can that last? Marcus is a saint, but he can't run the whole show forever, carrying dead weight." Dead weight. The words hung in the air, invisible and heavy. Alex sat frozen in his armchair, the leather cool against his skin. He had designed this house. Every line, every angle, every window placed to catch the morning light. Now he was just dead weight within its walls. The financial discussions also became more frequent. "I was thinking," Chloe said one evening, "it's probably not smart to have so much of our money tied up in Alex's firm. It's too volatile without him at the helm. We should diversify." "What do you suggest?" Alex asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Olivia's husband, Tom, has a friend in wealth management. He's apparently a genius. Olivia said we should talk to him. Move some of the portfolio into something more stable. Real estate, maybe." "My partnership agreement has specific clauses about divestment, Chloe. Marcus and I built that firm from nothing. I'm not pulling my capital out." "Don't be sentimental, Alex," she'd snapped. "This is about our survival. You're not thinking clearly." The first time he suspected actual theft was over something small. He'd asked Chloe to order a specific set of audiobooks, a technical series on architectural theory he wanted to stay current with. He knew the cost was around $200. A few days later, she came to him with a credit card slip to sign. She claimed it was a formality for a larger household purchase, but something about her haste made him suspicious. Later, using the accessibility features on his phone that read the screen aloud, he painstakingly navigated to his credit card account. The charge wasn't for a household item. It was for a $500 handbag from a designer boutique. The audiobooks were never ordered. It was a small betrayal, but it was a crack in the dam. If she would lie about something so trivial, what else was she lying about? He started a mental ledger. The expensive new wine subscription, the spa days Chloe and Olivia took, the weekend trip to a Napa resort they claimed was a gift from her parents. He began to feel like the host for a pair of elegant parasites, slowly draining him. Then, at the end of the third month, a miracle occurred. He woke one morning, and the uniform blackness of his world had a flaw. A faint, grayish light seeped in from the edge of his left eye. He blinked, thinking it was a phantom, a trick of a desperate mind. But it remained, a smudge of dawn against a sea of night. He didn't tell Chloe. A nascent protective instinct told him to wait, to see. Over the next few weeks, the light grew. Shapes began to emerge from the fog, the outline of the window, the hulking form of the wardrobe. Colors started to bleed back into his world, muted and washed out at first, like an old photograph, but they were there. The deep blue of his comforter, the pale yellow of the walls. He was meticulous in his secrecy. He continued to use his cane. He continued to move with the cautious, hesitant steps of a blind man. He'd keep his eyes mostly closed or unfocused, staring at a point on the wall just past whoever was speaking to him. It was an exhausting performance, a constant act of theater. But with each passing day, as his vision sharpened, the performances of those around him became clearer too. He saw the roll of Chloe's eyes when he asked for help. He saw the predatory glee in Olivia's face as she advised his wife on how to secure her assets. He saw the paperwork she put in front of him, no longer just a stack of anonymous paper, but a power of attorney form, a document to liquidate a stock portfolio, a contract to move a massive sum from his personal savings into a new joint account to which Olivia's name had been added as a contingent manager. He signed them all with his father's pen, the smooth, dark ink a stark contrast to the ugliness of their deceit. And each night after they were asleep, he would go to his office, the door closed, and turn on his computer. The screen, once a source of frustration, was now his greatest weapon. His fingers, which had once drawn buildings, now flew across the keyboard, downloading bank statements, saving email confirmations, and tracing the flow of his money into their grasping hands. He was an architect again, but this time he wasn't designing a building, he was designing a cage. The moment his new reality crystallized was an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. He was sitting in the living room, ostensibly listening to a classical music station, the dense chords of a Brahms symphony filling the space. His vision had returned to about 90% clarity, a fact known only to him, and after a clandestine visit, his very surprised neurologist, Dr. Evans, who had agreed to absolute confidentiality. Chloe and Olivia were in the kitchen, believing he was lost in the music and his own dark world. Their voices carried, sharp and clear over a quiet passage in the music. "Did you transfer the funds from the Sterling account?" Olivia asked. The sound of a knife chopping rhythmically on a wooden board punctuated her words. "I did it this morning," Chloe replied. "The full 200,000. It's in the new property fund." "Good. The less he has direct access to, the better. We can't have his partner Marcus poking around and asking questions." Alex's blood ran cold. The Sterling account was his personal savings, money earned years before he'd even met Chloe. It was his safety net, his legacy. He had never, not once, discussed moving that money. "Are you sure this is okay?" Chloe asked, a sliver of doubt in her voice. "Legally, I mean." Olivia let out a short, sharp laugh. "Chloe, darling, he gave you power of attorney. He can't see the documents. He can't access the accounts. You told me yourself, you have him sign whatever you put in front of him. And besides," her voice dropped into a conspiratorial whisper that was perfectly audible to the silent man in the next room. "He's too blind to see. He doesn't see the statements. He doesn't see the transfers. He doesn't see anything. He just signs where I tell him to sign." There it was, the phrase uttered with such casual cruelty that severed the last thread of love he had for his wife. It wasn't just about the money, it was the complete and utter dismissal of him as a human being. In their eyes, his blindness had rendered him an object, a tool, a non-entity whose only function was to enable their greed. The music swelled, a dramatic crescendo that mirrored the storm breaking inside him. But his face remained a mask of placid emptiness. He did not flinch. He did not react. He simply sat, and in that moment, the hurt curdled into something harder, colder, and far more dangerous: purpose. That night he made a call. "Marcus," he said, his voice low. "It's Alex. We need to talk. Not on the phone. Meet me at the old coffee shop on Elm Street tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone." There was a pause on the other end. "Alex, is everything all right? You sound—" "I'm fine," Alex cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Just be there." The next morning he told Chloe he was going for a walk, a new exercise regimen suggested by his physical therapist, a lie that was becoming second nature. He donned his dark glasses, took his white cane, and walked out the door. He walked the familiar route to the park. Then, once out of sight of his own street, he folded the cane, tucked it into his jacket, and hailed a cab. When he walked into the dimly lit coffee shop, Marcus was already there, a worried frown on his face. Alex slid into the booth, pulled off the sunglasses, and looked his friend and business partner directly in the eye. Marcus's jaw dropped. He stared, speechless, for a long moment. "Alex, your eyes." "My vision came back, Marcus. Most of it, anyway. It's been back for months." Marcus just shook his head in disbelief. "Months? Why didn't you say anything? Why the charade?" Alex took a slow sip of the water the waitress had brought. "Because my wife and her sister are robbing me blind," he said, the irony tasting like ash in his mouth. And I needed to see just how deep the rot went. For the next hour, Alex laid it all out. The whispers, the lies, the forged signatures on documents he was meant to be too blind to read, the systematic draining of his accounts. He showed Marcus the file he'd started on his phone, a meticulous record of dates, times, and amounts. Marcus listened, his initial shock turning to a cold fury. That's grand larceny, Alex. It's fraud. We should go to the police right now. No, Alex said, holding up a hand. Not yet. The police would be messy, public. Chloe would play the victim, the stressed wife making mistakes. Her family would close ranks. No, this needs to be architectural. It needs to be precise. It needs to be undeniable. They built a structure of lies on what they thought was a weak foundation. I want to pull the cornerstone out and watch it all come down on their heads. What do you need from me? Marcus asked, his voice firm. They're getting ambitious, Alex explained. They're not content with skimming anymore. They're planning something big. A real estate venture. I've overheard them talking about a new commercial development project, the Pinnacle Group. They think they're going to use my capital, the money they've siphoned, to get in on the ground floor. What they don't know is who is behind the Pinnacle Group. Marcus leaned forward, a slow smile spreading across his face as understanding dawned. You're kidding me. I've been working on it with the developers in secret for the last 2 months, through you, Alex confirmed. It's our firm's next big project. They are planning to use my own money to invest in my own company, and they think I'm too blind to see it. This is diabolical, Marcus breathed, shaking his head with a kind of awed respect. And I love it. So what's the plan? Alex leaned back in the booth, the first genuine smile in months touching his lips. The plan, he said, is to give them exactly what they want. We're going to let them walk right into the trap, and I'm going to be the one to spring it. The following months were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Alex played the part of the oblivious victim with chilling perfection. He allowed Chloe to guide him, to manage his life, to read him cherry-picked excerpts of their financial situation. Each act of condescension, each lie, was another brick in the wall of his resolve. He continued his secret work with Marcus, communicating through encrypted emails and burner phones, a level of subterfuge that felt absurd and yet wholly necessary. They structured the Pinnacle Group investment in such a way that it required a final, massive capital injection, one that would require Chloe and Olivia to pool everything they had taken and more. They took the bait just as he knew they would. Olivia, through her husband's contacts, presented the Pinnacle project to Chloe as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, an exclusive chance to get in on the ground floor of a landmark commercial development that was going to reshape the city's business district. The buy-in is significant, Olivia had explained over another family dinner, her eyes gleaming with avarice. But the returns will be astronomical. This is it, Chloe. This is how you secure your future, a future independent of circumstances. She glanced at Alex, who was carefully pushing peas around his plate. How significant? Chloe had asked, her voice a hushed, excited whisper. 1.5 million, Olivia said. We'd have to pool everything, all the money from the investment accounts, the Sterling Fund. We might even need to take a bridge loan against the house. Alex's house. The house he had designed and paid for long before Chloe had entered his life. He felt a muscle in his jaw tighten, but his expression remained serene. We'd need Alex to sign off on the loan, Chloe murmured, a flicker of concern in her voice. Olivia waved a dismissive hand. He'll sign. When has he ever said no? Just tell him it's for a portfolio restructure. He won't know the difference. Alex took a slow bite of his food. He could feel their eyes on him, this blind, helpless man who held the key to their glorious future. He chewed, swallowed, and then turned his head in the direction of his wife's voice. Chloe, he said, his voice mild, is everything all right? You've gone quiet. "Everything is perfect, darling," she cooed, reaching over to pat his hand. "Just perfect." He had never felt more alone or more in control. While they plotted to steal his future, he was meticulously reclaiming his past and fortifying his present. The evidence was compiled, categorized, and backed up in multiple secure locations. He had audio recordings of their most incriminating conversations, captured by a discreet app on the phone he always kept near him. He had screenshots, bank records, and a detailed timeline of every illicit transfer. Marcus had lined up their firm's legal counsel, a shark named Alistair Finch, who was waiting for Alex's signal. The symbolic object, his father's pen, became his constant companion. He would hold it during their planning sessions, the cool metal a reminder of his own quiet strength. Chloe would sometimes notice it. "You still carry that old thing around?" she asked once, a hint of pity in her voice. "You can't even write with it properly anymore." "It's comforting," he'd replied, which was the truth. It was comforting to know that the instrument of his humiliation would also be the instrument of their undoing. He practiced his signature for hours in the privacy of his office, not the shaky, guided scrawl they were used to, but his old, confident script. Strong, unwavering, final. The trap was becoming more elaborate, more perfect than he had initially imagined. Marcus had helped him set up a new, private holding company under a generic name, Northwood Investments. This was the entity that officially held Alex's majority stake in the Pinnacle Group project. All of the legal documents Chloe and Olivia were so excitedly preparing listed Northwood Investments as the primary partner they would be buying into. They believed it was a faceless corporation. They had no idea it was just another name for the man they were deceiving. Their greed made them sloppy. They were so focused on the grand prize that they missed the details. They used easily traceable wire transfers. They discussed their plans on their regular cell phones. They were amateurs playing a game against a grandmaster who had designed the board, the pieces, and the rules. As the day of the final signing approached, a strange, tense energy filled the house. It was the quiet before the storm. Chloe and Olivia were giddy with anticipation, buzzing with the thrill of their impending wealth. They treated Alex with a cloying, saccharine sweetness that was almost unbearable. They were gentler, more patient, as if they were soothing a farm animal before leading it to the abattoir. "Just one more signature, darling," Chloe had whispered to him 2 nights before the meeting, pressing a kiss to his temple. "And then all our worries will be over." "Your worries," he thought, keeping his face impassive. "Your worries are just beginning." He spent the final night in his office, not reviewing evidence, but looking at old photographs on his computer. A picture of him and Chloe on their wedding day, her smile radiant and, he had believed, genuine. A picture from a holiday in Italy, before the accident, both of them laughing on a sun-drenched balcony. Was any of it real? Had this cold, calculating woman always been lurking beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness to emerge? The question was a dull ache in his chest, a pain far deeper than the financial betrayal. The money was just numbers, the loss of trust, the loss of the woman he thought he had married. That was the true theft. He closed the photo album and opened a fresh document. He began to type. It was not a legal brief or a financial statement. It was a list of grievances. He cataloged every lie, every insult, every stolen dollar, every moment of humiliation. The spoon feeding, the dead weight comment, the handbag, the raiding of his father's legacy account, and at the very top, the phrase that started it all. "He's too blind to see." He typed until the sun began to rise, not with anger, but with a calm, surgical precision. He was an architect once more, drafting the blueprint of a demolition. When he was done, he printed the document and placed it in his briefcase, next to a file Alistair Finch had prepared for him. The storm was here. The day of the reckoning dawned cool and overcast, the sky a flat, pearlescent gray that perfectly matched the mood inside Alex. Chloe was a whirlwind of nervous energy, laying out his best suit, a dark charcoal wool he'd bought in London, and fussing over his tie. "You have to look the part, darling," she chirped, her fingers inexpertly knotting the silk. "We're meeting with very important people today." "I'm sure we are," Alex said, his voice a low rumble. He stood perfectly still, letting her fuss over him, a final, galling act of submission before the great reversal. He could see her reflection in the mirror of the dresser she thought was just a blank surface to him. He saw the avarice in her eyes, the triumphant little smile playing on her lips. She was looking at him, but she was seeing a vault, and she was about to hear the final, satisfying click of the lock tumbling open. Olivia arrived with her husband Tom, a man whose complicity was born of weakness and a desire to keep his high-maintenance wife happy. Tom avoided Alex's gaze, which was easy enough since Alex wasn't supposed to be able to meet it. Olivia, however, was practically vibrating with excitement. She wore a severe, expensive-looking red dress, a splash of predatory color in the muted tones of the morning. "Are you ready for the big day, Alex?" she asked, her voice dripping with false cheer. "Today is the first day of the rest of our lives." "I am more ready than you can possibly imagine," Alex replied. The subtext was lost on them entirely. They simply heard a compliant, clueless man being led along. The drive to the law office was tense. Chloe held his hand, her palm clammy. She kept up a steady stream of chatter about the weather, about the traffic, about a new restaurant she wanted to try, all of it a nervous tick to fill the silence. Alex said nothing. He simply stared out the window through his dark glasses, watching the city he had helped to build slide by. He saw the Sterling Tower, its glass facade reflecting the gray sky, a monument to a time before his life had fractured. The law offices of Finch, Gable, and Hayes were on the 50th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a place of hushed carpets, gleaming mahogany, and panoramic views of the city. As they were led into the main conference room, Alex noted with grim satisfaction that Marcus was already there, along with a severe-looking man in his 60s, whom Alex recognized from photos as his own lawyer, Alistair Finch. Chloe and Olivia assumed he was the legal counsel for the Pinnacle Group. "Chloe, Olivia, Tom," Marcus said, his voice professionally neutral. "Thank you for coming. This is Alistair Finch, who is overseeing the transaction." Alistair nodded curtly, his eyes sweeping over them with an unnerving intensity. "Please, have a seat." They arranged themselves around the massive table. Chloe guided Alex to a chair, placing a glass of water in front of him and his father's pen beside it. "Here you go, honey." The room felt cold, the air thick with unspoken things. On Chloe and Olivia's side, it was avaricious excitement. On Alex and Marcus's side, it was the coiled stillness of a predator about to strike. "Well," Olivia said, unable to contain herself any longer, clapping her hands together, "shall we get this show on the road? We are so thrilled about this partnership." Alistair Finch slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "This is the final investment agreement and the associated loan application against your primary residence, which requires Mr. Calloway's signature as co-owner." He gestured to Alex. Chloe eagerly pulled the documents closer. She flipped to the last page, where a bright yellow sticker indicated the signature line. "It's all ready to go," she said, her voice bright. She turned to Alex. "Darling, it's just like we discussed. The final paperwork for the portfolio restructuring. I just need you to sign right here." She took his hand, preparing to guide it to the page. The familiar ritual. The final humiliation. Alex let her hold his hand for a moment. He felt the slight tremor in her fingers, the dampness of her palm. He savored the silence that stretched in the room. Then very slowly he pulled his hand away from hers. He reached up and with a deliberate motion took off his dark glasses. He folded them neatly and placed them on the table. He blinked, allowing his eyes to adjust to the light, and then he lifted his head. He looked first at Olivia, whose triumphant smile began to falter, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. He looked at Tom, who flinched and stared down at the table. Finally, he turned his gaze to his wife. He looked directly into her eyes, a thing he had not done in 8 months. Chloe's breath hitched. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, pale mask. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The cheerful, confident facade shattered like cheap glass, revealing the raw panic underneath. What's going on?" she stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. "Alex, your eyes." "Yes, Chloe," Alex said, his voice calm, measured, and utterly devoid of the warmth she had once known. "My eyes. They've been fine for 5 months." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical presence in the room, heavy and suffocating. Olivia's face was a canvas of dawning horror. Marcus watched, his expression grim. Alistair Finch sat back, a silent observer to a drama he had been briefed on, but was only now seeing unfold. Chloe just stared, her mind clearly struggling to process the impossible. 5 months? No, you can't. I don't understand. "Oh, I think you do," Alex said, his voice cutting through her confusion like a shard of ice. He picked up his father's pen. The weight of it felt different now. It was no longer a comfort, it was a weapon. "You understand completely. You just never thought this day would come. You thought I was a piece of furniture, a broken appliance. You thought I was too blind to see." He let the words hang in the air, the echo of her own cruel dismissal. He saw the flicker of recognition, of pure terror, in her eyes as she heard her own secret words thrown back at her. "I saw everything, Chloe," he continued, his voice never rising, yet filling every corner of the vast room. "I saw the contempt. I saw the lies. I saw you and your sister conspiring in my kitchen to steal from me. I heard you call me dead weight. I saw the bank statements you thought I couldn't read. I saw the power of attorney form you had me sign, the one that gave you the keys to my life's work. You thought you were so clever." He slid his briefcase onto the table and opened it. He removed the document he had typed the night before. "I made a list," he said conversationally, as if discussing a grocery order. "I find it helps to be organized." He began to read. Item 1, March 12th. A charge for $530 at a boutique called Sylvie's. You told me it was for household expenses. It was for a handbag. Olivia flinched. Chloe looked as if she'd been struck. Item 2, March 28th through April 5th. A series of withdrawals from our joint checking account totaling $4,000. Cash withdrawals. You told me it was for a property tax payment. The tax was paid online from a different account 2 weeks prior. The cash was for a weekend trip to Napa for you and Olivia. Item 3, he went on, his voice relentless. April 19th, you had me sign a document you claimed was for our insurance provider. It was in fact a legal instrument granting you full power of attorney, which you used the very next day to begin liquidating my stock portfolio. A portfolio valued at $375,000. He didn't look up from the page, but he could feel the atmosphere in the room curdling, the air growing thick with shame and fear. Tom had gone pale, looking at his wife with a new, horrified expression. Item 4, May 2nd, the big one. A wire transfer of $200,000 from my private Sterling savings account, money my father left me, into a new fund. A fund to which you had, quite illegally, added Olivia's name as a manager. He paused and finally looked up, pinning Olivia with his gaze. You were very specific about that one, Olivia. You said, the less he has direct access to, the better. Did I get the quote right? Olivia shrank back in her chair, her face a blotchy mess of red and white. She looked at Chloe, a desperate, silent plea for her sister to do something, to say something. But Chloe was frozen, impaled by the truth. And that brings us to today, Alex said, setting the paper down. This magnificent venture, the Pinnacle Group, the investment of a lifetime, the $1.5 million buy-in that was going to secure your futures. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You have pooled everything, haven't you? Every dollar you stole from me. You even took out a bridge loan against this house." He gestured to the paperwork on the table. "My house." "Alex, please," Chloe finally whispered, tears beginning to stream down her face. I I can explain. It got out of hand. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what to do," Alex said, his voice hardening. "You chose greed over loyalty. You chose contempt over compassion. You chose to betray the man who loved you, who trusted you, who was at the most vulnerable point in his life." He then turned to Alistair Finch. "Alistair, would you be so kind as to explain to my wife and her sister the precise nature of the entity they are so eager to invest in?" Alistair leaned forward, a grim smile on his thin lips. "Of course, Alex. Ladies, the investment you are about to make is into a primary development partner called Northwood Investments. It is the majority shareholder in the Pinnacle Group project." He paused for effect. "Northwood Investments is a private holding company. Its sole director and owner is Mr. Alexander Calloway." The implication landed with the force of a physical blow. Olivia let out a small, strangled gasp. Chloe's face, already pale, became utterly bloodless. You own it?" she breathed. "The whole thing?" "I don't just own it, Chloe," Alex said, the final piece of his architecture falling into place. "I designed it, the project, and this meeting. I have been orchestrating this for months with Marcus's help. Every document you received, every prospectus you reviewed, came from me. You were planning to use my stolen money to invest in my own project." He picked up the pen. He looked at the signature line where Chloe had wanted him to sign his house away. Then he looked back at her. "You wanted my signature," he said. He then took the investment agreement, flipped past the page she had marked, and found a different one near the back, a clause Marcus and Alistair had drafted. It was a rejection of the proposed investment from Chloe and Olivia's fund, citing irregularities and a conflict of interest, and it triggered an immediate audit of their finances. He uncapped the pen. The nib touched the paper. With a steady hand, he signed his name. Not the shaky, uncertain scrawl of a blind man, but the bold, confident signature of a man in full command of his world. "There," he said, sliding the signed document over to Alistair. "It's done." The immediate aftermath was chaos condensed into a single, silent moment of implosion. For a few seconds, no one moved or spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. Chloe stared at the signature on the document Alex had signed, her mind refusing to accept the reality before her. It was his name, written with a clarity and force she had not seen in almost a year. It was the signature of a stranger, a man she realized she had never known at all. Olivia was the first to break, her face, which had been a mask of horror, contorted with rage. You bastard," she spat at Alex, her voice trembling. "You set us up. You played us." Alex met her furious gaze without flinching. "You are mistaken, Olivia," he said, his tone still unnervingly calm. "I didn't play you. I simply held up a mirror and let you see your own reflection. You did all of this to yourselves. I just made sure the lighting was good." "This is entrapment," Olivia shrieked, turning to Alistair Finch. "You can't do this. We'll sue." Alistair Finch offered a thin, predatory smile. "On what grounds, Miss Vance? For being presented with a legitimate business opportunity? For attempting to invest funds of a questionable origin into a project, an investment which has now been formally rejected? Or perhaps you'd like to file a suit based on the extensive evidence Mr. Calloway has compiled of felony fraud, embezzlement, and larceny. I assure you discovery for that particular case would be most illuminating." He tapped a thick binder on the table in front of him. "We have copies of everything. Bank records, audio recordings, signed documents. Shall I begin?" Olivia's face crumpled. The rage evaporated, replaced by the raw, animal panic of a cornered creature. She looked at her husband Tom, who was staring at her with an expression of pure disgust. He stood up abruptly. "I need some air," he muttered, not looking at anyone, and walked out of the conference room. The click of the door shutting behind him sounded like a final judgment. Now all eyes were on Chloe. The tears that had been streaming down her face were coming faster now, her body shaking with violent sobs. She slid out of her chair and onto her knees, crawling the short distance to Alex's side of the table. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "Alex, please," she begged, her voice thick and broken. "Please, look at me. I'm so sorry. I was lost. I was terrified after your accident. Olivia, she got in my head. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you." The words, which once would have been his entire world, now felt like hollow echoes in a vast, empty chamber. He looked down at the woman on the floor, the wife he had adored, and he felt nothing but a profound and weary sadness. "Love?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a final verdict. "Is that what you call it? You don't destroy what you love, Chloe. You don't humiliate it. You don't strip it of its dignity and its worth, and then pick its pockets when you think it can't see. That isn't love, it's parasitism." He stood up, towering over her. "You weren't scared. You were opportunistic. My weakness didn't frighten you, it excited you. It gave you and your sister a chance to live the life you felt you deserved, without having to earn it. The only thing you're sorry for is that you got caught." He turned to Marcus. "Marcus, please have security escort Miss Vance and her sister from the building. They are not to be allowed back on the premises." He then looked at Alistair. "Please file the divorce papers this afternoon. Cite irreconcilable differences. I'm not pressing criminal charges. The financial ruin and public humiliation will be punishment enough. I want a clean break." "Alex, no!" Chloe cried, grabbing at the leg of his trousers. "Don't do this. Where will I go? What will I do? The money, it's all gone. We put everything into this. The house." "The loan against the house was contingent on the investment being accepted," Alistair interjected smoothly. "Since the investment was rejected, the loan application is void. The house is safe. His house." The finality of it crushed her. She collapsed back onto the floor, her sobs turning into a desperate, wretched wail. Security guards, two large, impassive men, entered the room, alerted by Marcus. They moved towards Olivia, who was still frozen in her chair, and then helped a sobbing Chloe to her feet. As they were escorted out, Chloe looked back at Alex one last time, her face a mess of tears and mascara, her eyes pleading for a reprieve that would never come. "I loved you," she whispered again, a final, desperate gambit. Alex simply held her gaze until the door closed behind her, leaving him in the sudden, profound silence of his reclaimed life. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and quiet consolidation. The divorce was swift and uncontested. Chloe, stripped of her leverage and facing the mountain of evidence Alistair had prepared, had no choice but to accept the terms. She walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and the public shame that now clung to her and her sister like a second skin. Their social circle, built on the fragile foundations of wealth and status, evaporated overnight. News of the failed Pinnacle venture and the subsequent divorce spread like wildfire through their community. The story was told in hushed tones at cocktail parties and charity events, a story of greed, betrayal, and a spectacular fall from grace. Olivia's husband Tom filed for divorce a week after the disastrous meeting. He had been a silent enabler, but the stark reality of his wife's character, laid bare in that conference room, was something he could not ignore. Olivia was left alone, ostracized and financially ruined. The sisters who had been inseparable in their plotting were now united only in their shared disgrace. Alex, meanwhile, threw himself back into his work. He returned to the firm not as a ghost, but as a man reborn. There was a new gravitas to him, a quiet authority that had been forged in the crucible of his ordeal. He and Marcus officially launched the Pinnacle Group project, and it was even more successful than they had projected. He moved out of the house he had shared with Chloe, unable to scrub the memories of her betrayal from its walls. He sold it and put the money into a charitable foundation he started in his father's name, dedicated to supporting people with disabilities. He saw Chloe one last time, about 6 months later. He was walking down the street after a site meeting, enjoying the simple pleasure of a crisp autumn day, when he saw her. She was working as a hostess at a mid-range restaurant, the kind of place she would have once sneered at. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by a simple black uniform. Her face was thinner, and the confident, arrogant spark in her eyes was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. Their eyes met across the street. For a moment, he saw a flash of the woman he had married, a flicker of panic and shame in her expression. She quickly looked away, turning to greet a customer with a forced, brittle smile. Alex watched her for a moment longer, not with anger or triumph, but with a distant, clinical pity. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a deep sense of waste. They could have had a good life, a real life, if only she had valued the man beside her more than the money in his bank account. He turned and walked away, the chapter finally, truly closed. That evening, he sat on the balcony of his new apartment, a sleek, modern space overlooking the city lights. Marcus was with him, sharing a bottle of wine. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, sensing his friend's reflective mood. Alex nodded, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. "I am," he said, and he meant it. "I was thinking about something my father used to say. He was a builder, a carpenter. He always said, 'You can't build a strong house on a weak foundation.' I thought he was just talking about wood and concrete." He looked out at the sprawling metropolis, a landscape of steel and glass he knew so intimately. "I spent my life designing structures, Marcus, focusing on the integrity of the materials, the soundness of the design. I was so focused on the architecture of buildings that I forgot to check the foundation of my own life, of my marriage." "It wasn't your fault, Alex," Marcus said softly. "You trusted her. That's not a flaw." "No," Alex agreed. "Trust isn't a flaw, but blindness is. And I'm not talking about my eyes. I was blind to her character long before the accident. I saw the little signs of her obsession with status, her casual cruelty to people she deemed beneath her. I just chose to ignore them. I wanted to believe in the beautiful facade she presented to the world." He took a sip of wine. "The accident didn't make me a victim. It just revealed what was already there. It subjected the structure of our relationship to a stress test, and it failed, spectacularly." He smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "But the good thing about a structural failure is that you get to demolish the old building and build something new, something stronger, something with a foundation of truth." He had lost a wife, a fortune, and 8 months of his life to a lie. But in the process, he had found something he had not realized was missing: himself. He had learned the difference between sight and vision. Sight was merely the ability to see what was in front of you. Vision was the ability to see what lay beneath the surface, the hidden flaws, the secret strengths, the true character of the people you chose to build your life with. He had his vision back now, clearer and sharper than ever before. And the future he was building would be a testament to that. It would be honest, it would be strong, and it would be entirely his own. The story of Alex and Chloe serves as a powerful reminder that a person's true worth is not in their bank account or their social standing, but in their character and integrity. It teaches us that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned through loyalty and compassion, especially when life tests us. Arrogance and greed build a fragile house that will inevitably collapse under the weight of its own deceit. But patience, dignity, and a foundation of truth can withstand any storm. In the end, what we see with our hearts is always more important than what we see with our eyes. What did you think of Alex's strategy? Was it justice or was it revenge? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for being a part of our community. If you found this story meaningful, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of justice, redemption, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Until next time, take care and remember to check your foundations.